3 straight games at home for the Celtics, starting with the Blazers tonight, then a 4-game California trip beginning with the Warriors next Tuesday. Gary Washburn has been along for the roller coaster ride as the C's beat writer for the Boston Globe, and he's with us now here on Game Time. Gary, you wrote today that, quote, something is seriously wrong with this Celtics team. What in particular stands out to you most about what you've seen during this downturn?
I mean, I just think it's the lapses. The 18-0 run last night against Toronto, it's just fallen asleep at the most inopportune times. The terrible quarters. They'll play 3 good quarters and a terrible quarter and then lose the game by 5 or 6. It's usually been the third quarter. The last couple nights it's been the second quarter. The Bulls outscored them 36-18. In the second quarter a couple nights ago. Then last night in Toronto outscored them 36-13. I mean, that's unacceptable if you're a championship caliber team to just have those 12-minute lapses, times where you just don't score and then the other team just plays, globetrotters against you.
Well, it's fascinating trying to read the tea leaves here from the outside, and you hear the players saying things like, quote, we're just not together, and quote, we're not fighting. How clear is it at this point that whatever the issue is, it's not X's and O's?
Yeah, it's definitely mental. I mean, execution's part of it, but I think that's just lends in the guys trying to do a little too much. You have a lot of talented players in this team, but a lot of guys from night to night don't know their particular role, and so they try to play hero ball. And I don't think there's a bunch of guys in here who are selfish, who are just trying to get their points and don't care about winning. I think there's guys who truly believe that they can do what it takes to win, and so, okay, I'll take this guy one-on-one. Okay, I can hit this three-pointer. But it ends up being a bad possession. It ends up being something that's not productive, and then all of a sudden there's a run out, a fast break, and Toronto's dunking, uncontested dunk, or guys are just lapsing, or guys are putting their heads down after missing shots. I mean, this team has to be stronger, more mental fortitude, just get back on defense, the basic things that great teams do. And this team hasn't been playing that way for a while.
Gary, Steve Smith, I know you're in the inside, but just looking on the outside, they are so talented. They have so many players. Reminds me a little bit of our Portland Trailblazers team when you had 11, 12 deep. But there comes a time where you have to cut the roster down, and that's where I look for Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens. Somebody can't play these minutes. Somebody can't be that guy. And that's my opinion of the Boston Celtics. They're going to have to make a hard call and have to sit somebody. What are your thoughts on that, Gary?
Steve, I agree with you. I mean, they're just going to have to play potentially an 8-man rotation, maybe 9. They can't run 10, 11 guys out there. They're going to have to shorten things up. They're going to have to give guys more minutes and more defined roles. They're going to have to highlight guys like Jaylen Brown. It might be to the point of taking a guy like Terry Rozier out of the rotation, or putting a Brad Wanamaker in, or taking a guy like Daniel Tice out. Like, they're going to have to figure something out. I think they need to use rookie Robert Williams more. He's a rim protector, a guy who can, catch those alley-oops. He's kind of like a baby, low-budget Tyson Chandler at this point in his career. Maybe they can throw him in for minutes as they did last night against Toronto. They're going to have to do something, but you're right, Steve. To sit there and run 11 guys out there and go, okay, do what you do, and guys not know their roles, not know how many minutes they're going to play, not know they're going to play in the fourth quarter, or when they're going to get taken out of the game, that's really rough.
Gary, should we read anything into Danny Ainge being in that locker room talking to Kyrie in front of his locker after that game? Is there something more going on? Is this about some long-term, preventive care you're doing with Kyrie, or is this just about right now getting this team back on track?
Sekou, I don't think it's too much to look into it besides Kyrie maybe venting a little bit, or maybe Danny saying, what do you see out there? What's going on? And, just kind of fostering that relationship. They still think they have a chance to bring Kyrie back. As remote as that is becoming day to day, they still think they have a chance to sign him to a long-term deal. So you want to make him comfortable. And if you're Danny Ainge, you want to talk to Kyrie and see what he thinks. This guy's a champion, an Olympic champion, a multi-time All-Star. So he knows what's going out there on the court. Now, whether he can fix it or not, that's another question. But I do think that it's significant that they're talking, that Kyrie isn't icing people out, or he isn't, he's being short with us. I think they're getting a little bit impatient with the media. That's always the case. But I do think it's a good sign for Celtics faithful that him and Danny are communicating.
Well, he certainly was short with you guys last night, watching his post-game comments with the media assembled around him. But that is part of the equation here. the specter of the offseason that looms in just a few months from now. And this week, of course, there was the Athletic report from Shams Charania that Ainge made clear to the Pelicans that any Celtic, quote, can be available this summer. How has that news been received?
I mean, these guys have social media. They read articles. They know that this team is potentially going to make an offer for Anthony Davis in July, and a lot of guys like a Tatum and a Brown and even a Rozier and Marcus Smart know that their names could be in that trade. So guys understand, and that doesn't help matters at all, because there's already a level of uncertainty with this team, because with Marcus Morris being a free agent, with Kyrie's situation, Al Horford can opt out. Terry Rozier is a restricted free agent. This team can be significantly different next year. So there's already been a pressure on this team to perform this year. But now, with the AD thing hovering over him, I think guys are maybe just figuring out, well, what do I do when I know I'm not going to be here next year? Or do I start looking for homes in New Orleans? Or what do I do? Because, obviously my name's going to be bantied about if you're a guy like a Jason Tatum or a Jaylen Brown, because if I'm, Danny Ferry, the GM, Tatum's the first guy I'm asking for, and then I'm asking for Brown after that. So that has to mess with the heads of some of these young guys who have not been exposed yet to the big business of the NBA.
Well, the good news is the housing market in New Orleans is much more agreeable than Boston, so they've got that going for them.
Agreed.
If that's the way it plays out, right? Gary
Correct,
Washburn,
Matt,
the Boston Globe, on the soap opera with the Celtics. Thanks much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, when you hear the comments from the guys about fighting and all the other sort of coded messaging from the Celtics inside the locker room, a lot of it has to do with the defensive end. And Brad Stevens even said we're taking shortcuts defensively. What's he talking about?
Well, and he's right. But I think also, how do you correct it? I'm going to play the guys that are not taking shortcuts. You have so much talent, Sekou, and it comes down, just from my opinion, you can't play 10 or 11 guys. You can be talented. You got to cut this roster to 8, 9. And that's why I look at Brad hasn't made that decision right now. There's so many guys that play for the Celtics, and they're so talented, but they never get a rhythm on either end. The reason why they were so good last year, their identity was defense. Mm-hmm. They came out, Terry Rozier knew he's going to play 30 to 35 minutes. Marcus Smart knew he's going to play 30 to 35 minutes. Now it's in and out, in and out. And it looks like, depending on how you're playing offensively, that you're going to stay in the game. Their rotation has to get cut to 8 or 9. The odd man out for me right now, not because I don't think he's a great player. He's just not ready. Gordon Hayward, physically, he doesn't look like he's there. Yeah. He could be next year, but Gordon Hayward might be the guy, in my opinion. They have to sit and let somebody else go out there and play.
That is fascinating, right? Given the contract and everything. And he's actually played really well in February. Shooting percentages are way up. But you're right, he doesn't look like the All-Star, the Western Conference All-Star they signed.
And rightfully so, because of the injury.
Sure, it makes perfect sense. But defensively, I think we have tape here to support some of the defensive issues that you've seen.
Matt, and we're going to show this. It's not because they're not capable. It's when you're not on the same page. Watch this. I mean, there's 4 Celtics back, and you see Siakam getting out and running, Jason Tatum trying to help. You go help that guy. Right now, this team right now is like, it's not my fault. There's a drive. This is in a half-court situation. You saw the Boston Celtics last year, the year before that, rotating. There's 4 or 5 guys back, and you throw a pass. There's no effort. Yes, Kawhi is bigger than Marcus Smart, but where's the next guy to make him pass the basketball? And if I would say they didn't have the personnel to do it, then you start to worry. They are a fabulous defensive team.
Yeah.
Why are there not now? There's not injuries. This team right now is just not on the same page. They're all looking at each other. Something's going wrong. Also, watch their bench. There's no guys excited for each other when they're playing.
There are a ton of long, rangy defenders on that team. There's no reason they should be making plays like that.
Less is more sometimes in this league. And last year, when Brad Stevens had less to work with from a rotation standpoint, they got more out of everybody. Now that you have this abundance of bodies and all these options and you can't figure out which buttons to push, it's put a different kind of pressure on Brad Stevens. And we haven't talked about that. Don't forget about all the genius talk. And now he was arguably the best coach in basketball last year, but it was in a situation where these young players were forced into roles that maybe, Smitty, they weren't ready for, but they thrived in that spotlight. Now you're asking them to play completely different roles, and they're not excelling the way they did. But it's more about the vets even than it is the young guys, because when they play without Kyrie, you look and see how much different they play, how much more effective they are individually, and therefore as a group. I think the other thing that's really hurt them throughout this whole stretch was Aaron Baines being out. You're talking about a physical guy who brought a certain kind of energy and a balance that, he and Al Horford, kind of as your two big men and defensive anchors, that was missing for a long time for this team. So you didn't have that to lean on, that defensive backbone. And we cannot overstate how important the talk that consumed the Los Angeles Lakers team about the trade deadline, even though nobody thought Boston was going to be making any moves at the deadline, that talk invaded their locker room as well. So their young guys are now digesting this daily dose of who's going to be here, who's not. You start playing with a different focus. You start understanding that, hey, this might not be my long-term home. Let me go out here and showcase myself, get mine. And that's when you start looking around that locker room and hearing what guys are saying. You start reading between the line and parsing every word, and it makes you wonder, are the issues they're having technical or emotional? And I think it's a twisted combination of both that has led to them being the fragile team that they are right now.
Sekou makes a good point. Less is more. Baines was a guy that you can play him 40 minutes, but he doesn't need a play ran for him at all. And then I think also, like you said, there's another person in that locker room, the trade talk. And then now the media is in the locker room. There's more media in the locker room not talking about how well you're playing. Do you feel you're leaving? Where's Kyrie going? I think now the distractions, and that's where it's gone. That's the business of basketball. You still have to be a pro and still come out there and do your job.
It's Brad Stevens' fifth year on the job. He's improved in wins every other season. This is setting up to be the first disappointing season since he arrived in Boston.